Dudley. Okay, at some point, fast forward, rewind, rewind, fast forward, we're in a prison camp. Now, this prison camp is logging operations. We're in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I'm on logging operations. As I've said, I've went from minimum custody to middle to max, down the middle to max, out to minimum with a parole, and then come back anyway. We're on logging operations, and so you got prisoner log. You're up in the middle of no fucking where. They don't worry about you escaping. You're in the middle of no fucking where, and logging operations consist of a lot of things. Okay, like you brush the sides of the county roads and state roads. You work for the DNR, which is Department of Natural Resources. You can get working with federal forestry. It can include busting up beaver dams to whatever, but mostly tree cutting, chainsaws, logging crews, and we brush ORV trails so snowmobilers and people or four wheelers in the summer got places to go without branches hitting them in the face. We do state parks and we do local parks. Cleaning up the area, or if you got deadheads, which are hangers, we do stuff like hemlock releases, which means you got all these old growth trees, and then the shittier trees, we call them like birch and aspen and stuff. They just grow like weeds, and they grow up between them and then canopy over them and take all the sunlight and kill them. So to protect the old growth, you got to go through and cut them out, which is really gnarly work because they get hung up. So anyway, the story is, we're a bunch of prisoners. We're on these small logging teams, 10-man crews, most often smaller than that. And over some months, years, you get good. Some people get good, some people are not so good, but like after a while, I mean, especially if you've done a lot of cutting, like part of the Hiawatha National Forest burned down, and they wanted to clear cut everything so these college people and tree huggers and shit, they can come in and plant trees. And it was nasty, gnarly work, like silty, and every two, three, four fucking trees, your chainsaw's dull. You got to keep sharpening it, and every couple days replace your chains. And anyway, it was just nasty. But we also did cedar harvest, which is around Michigan. If you see all the state parks and all the signs and all the stuff, it's all made out of wood. So the cedar grows in the swamp. And then in the middle of winter, when the swamp freezes, then you could go in there and get the trees. And it also seconds as a feeding program for the deer. Because if you have an especially cold winter, the deer get hungry and they don't have anything but pine needles and they can't eat the tops of the cedars. But when you cut the cedars down, they can eat the top while you cut sticks out of it. Logs, we call it cutting sticks, 16-foot and 8-foot sticks, you know, to make shit. So, anyway, here's a story. Every once in a while, you get fucking idiots. I mean, fucking idiots. So, we got this guy on our crew. We're doing this one operation, and it was a hot mess. I mean, a partial burn down, what have you. There were some overgrowth hanging near a campground, which could fall and kill somebody. And something like this, you want skilled sawsmen. You want. So we had kind of ranks. But anyway, we get this guy from another crew because nobody wanted him, even though he's been around a long time. He was just an idiot, right? So it puts him on our crew. At first place, the guy kept raiding our lunches and drinking our coffee and shit when we were gone, and the boss wouldn't let him anywhere near a saw. So we're doing this one job. We're way the fuck in the middle of nowhere. It was an hour and a half to get there, And I don't mean LA traffic. I mean like no traffic, like in the middle of nowhere and driving 80, 90, 100 miles an hour and still take an hour and a half to get there. So we go to this operation, man. So we're cutting down partial burn trees and this and that. And the way it works, and I love the logging operations, man. I loved it because it was almost like freedom. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and like you could just go off on your own. So long as when they beat the horn on the van, you could hear it or you were nearby and the boss would go around check on people. You had small time at that point. I had a parole in the bag. So anyway, but you could just go off and do your thing. So I would go off in the woods, find myself a little clearing, get myself some wood, build a fire, put my coffee on, sharpen up my saw, and just drop trees and, do my thing. So anyway, so we're doing this nasty job. The boss beeps the horn. We come in at lunch, and we got this idiot fucking Dudley with us, right? But nobody wants nothing to do with them because sometimes you go out and choose so somebody can help push, somebody can help stalk, somebody whatever. But nobody want to be with Dudley because he's going to kill somebody or get somebody killed. Okay. And matter of fact, one time we drove an hour and a half all the way to this location. We're working 10-hour days, sometimes 12-hour days. We drive all the way out there and we're sitting by the campfire and for breakfast, I'm fucking sharpening my saw. I've been sitting here sharpening this saw for 20 minutes. I was making it razor sharp. The sharper you get it, the more you can get done before you got to sharpen it again. So I'm just going on and say, this motherfucker comes walking up. He just walked up and said, "Hey, is that sharp?" And raked his finger across it. We all just sit there looking dumbfounded, stupid, flayed wide open, flayed his finger wide the fuck open. My boss just looks at him and says, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I said, "Dude, you see me just sharpening this saw for the last 20 minutes. He's like, "Well, I didn't think it was sharp like that." Everybody in the van got to go all the way back to camp. This fucking dude's got to go to the hospital and get stitches. So anyway, here's the story I'm getting at. So we're used to doing small trees and brush and deadheads and clear cutting some shit and doing cedar, which ain't too big and this and that. Everybody loves to drop a big tree. I mean, come on, man. And not a live one that you can't put your arms around just to hear it crack, 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 pop, and boom, and shake the earth. There's something fucking cool about it. I mean, making bombs is funner, but that's pretty fucking cool, you know. So anyway, we're clear cutting this area. Now in Michigan, the state tree is a white pine. Okay. It's illegal to cut them down and you can't do it. And they're some of the biggest and baddest ass woods, besides some oaks and elms and some beechwood and really hard. But we're doing this cutting operation, and there's this massive white pine, and we're salivating. We're like, "Oh, I want." Well, we can't cut it down, but the boss is like, "Well, you know what?" They said, cut everything, and we're like, "Well, we better not." So we really wanted to fucking do it, and the boss like, "Wait a minute, I'm gonna check on this." So he calls into the ranger station and says, "Okay, mark the trees, get some paint, mark the areas, mark the trees." We come back the next day, sure enough, that fucker's marked. All of us sawmen, the better ones, we're salivating. We're like, "Oh my God, I want it." We're arguing over who's going to get this tree. We're at lunch, drawing straws or taking dibs, not literally, but we're bucking for who's going to get it. And my boss says, "Dudley's going to cut the tree down." And we're like, "What?" He'll fucking kill himself. And we go back to the van, and a couple of us senior guys say, "Hey, boss, like, that dude's gonna fucking kill himself." And he's like, "You know what? Natural selection." I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe this cop is just gonna let this guy fucking kill himself. But I'm still a convict, even though I'm thinking like I'm free and I'm out here doing this. I'm like in prison politics. I'm like, I ain't got nothing to do with it. Okay, so my boss goes and tells Dudley, says, you're cutting that tree down. He goes, oh hell yeah, and he's all excited. And we're like after lunch, so we eat lunch. Here's my boss. He puts some chaps on Dudley, gets him his vest, and gets him, says, okay, cut that fucking tree down. He's like everybody else in the van. We get in the van and we must drive 100 fucking yards. 100 yards halfway up a hill by this little lake area. And I like, what are you doing? He says, well, if it comes this way, I don't want to get. And we're like, man, I don't know if I can watch this. You know, it's like watching with one eye. Like, and sure enough, here comes this fool. He gets fucking lays into this tree. And he can't do his saw right. He didn't even make a notch or nothing. And his shit is just smoking, man. His shit's fucking smoking, dude. He's shit fucking smoking. Wood chips flying. And we're like, oh my God. And now, one of the bad things, it was kind of an older growth area. So when you're cutting down a real big tree, you got to kind of get a line of sight. You got to make a lane, an alley. You got to know, like, okay, I'm going to drop this because if it gets hung up, you got to get it down. You can't leave the tree hung up if it catches on other trees and stays up there. You got to figure out a way. And this tree is so big that if it gets hung up, boy, you got a disaster on your hands. Okay. So you're responsible to get it down. You can't leave it up there. So anyway, sure enough, this motherfucker, I don't know how long it took. It was like forever. We're on the edge of our seats and he's and he'd stop for a while and he'd look and say, hey, it ain't going nowhere. And my boss is like, you're doing great. You're doing great. You got this. And we're like, oh my God, he's going to kill himself. And so he's fucking cutting it, cutting it, cutting. And then you see it, and the worst thing unimaginable happens. Sure enough, a breeze comes and it rocks back and it sets back and it's going to hang. And we're like, oh my gosh. And then maybe it's like the hand of God. Now, I don't know what happened. Something happened, but that tree just caught like a little breeze, a little bounce, and it just went forward, rolled off the tree next to it, and just landed in the most spectacular, the biggest kaboom we've ever heard, and it was picture fucking perfect. And here come Dudley, stupid ass, smiling all ear to ear, and dropped this big tree. So it wasn't a bad one. It was just a funny story, and yet, you know, you had to be there kind of, but I'm glad you weren't there. So remember, we're all prisoners, but sometimes it feels good to feel free.